And now for a taste of things to come.
A great slam and then some. It's on.
It's time for the new GameOn Podcast. We're celebrating our favorite games.
Falcon Punch!
Mamma mia!
Finish him!
It's a little bit of the old,
You're good, but I'm better.
a little bit of the new,
I am assuming direct control.
and everything in between.
But enough talk! How about you?
Let's get things started.
Get more from your gaming habit with Jeff Johnson.
Game on! Game on! Game on!
And it's the new GameOn Podcast. I am Jeff Johnson, and thank you for joining us on whatever platform you are listening to us this time, whether it be YouTube, Spreaker, Anchor, or a whole host of other podcast networks. Thank you, Anchor, for sharing us around to every place under the sun. We're happy to have you join us this week. This week, it's a little bit different, as I haven't had much of a chance to play games that I haven't talked about on the show before. I did get a chance to beat Digimon Cyber Story Complete Edition this past weekend, but that being said, I talked plenty about Digimon in the last episode. Don't need to really touch on that this week. We need to go for a more serious topic this time, and we're going to dive into some gaming news that has recently come up. So we're shifting from Digimon to Pokemon this week. Yeah, I know what I just did there. Basically what we're doing is we're looking ahead about 2 weeks to the latest Pokemon release. The Isle of Armor becomes available through the Sword and Shield expansion pass June 17th. Nintendo released a preview video of what to expect with that, so you better believe we're talking about that. And also we got a big announcement from Sega yesterday, or should I say small? The company is celebrating the Game Gear's 30th anniversary by announcing the Game Gear Micro. And so this is the newest classic console to hit the market, and unfortunately it's looking like we've got ourselves a major setback for these type of throwback systems, so we'll be diving into that announcement as well. Also, a new game came out last week that I picked up immediately, adding to the ridiculous collection listed on my GG account. Shantae and the Seven Sirens is now available on major consoles, and we'll be talking about that today. So that's what you can expect from this week. I'm Jeff Johnson. This is the new GameOn Podcast.
Are you looking to jumpstart your game?
My spoon is too big.
Have you had enough of games being remade over and over again?
My spoon is too big.
Are you looking for an insider's view of the gaming industry?
My spoon is too big.
Don't you care about anything but spoons?
I am a banana.
Yeah. Just listen to Game On with Jeff Johnson.
The new GameOn Podcast continues. Here's Jeff. And it's the new GameOn Podcast. I am Jeff Johnson. Let's get right into it. We're talking about Shantae and the Seven Sirens. Now, I've been a huge fan of the Shantae games for several years now, ever since first picking up some of the games in this series on my Wii U. And this really shouldn't be a surprise, given how much I enjoy the Metroid and Castlevania games. I mean, many of those games make an appearance on my top 100 list. And considering many of the newer Shantae games are Metroidvanias in their own right, it just seems like it's a natural fit. But in any case, it's an enjoyable series, and I was happy to see the 5th installment, Shantae and the Seven Sirens, coming out at the end of May for all major consoles. So, like I said, naturally, I picked this up immediately, and I've played through most of Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, and beaten the Half Genie Hero game. I've played both of the other Shantae games, and I'm looking forward to giving this newest one a serious go in the near future. So, what I'm bringing to you today is basically my first impressions on the new Shantae game, because I've had a chance to play it a little bit, and also I've got a chance to see just how much my daughter is enjoying it. My daughter, unsurprisingly, likes games where she gets to play as girl heroes, so stuff like A Hat in Time and Battle Princess Madeline were two of her early favorites for the Xbox One, and any game where she can choose to play as a girl main character instead of a boy, she's going with the girl main character. So it's been really cool to see that they've done that in the last few generations of the Pokemon games. You get to play as a girl or a boy, your choice, and I know exactly which way she goes every single time she starts one of those games. So suffice to say, Shantae is a natural fit for Paige, and despite the difficulty of some of those games, she's starting to enjoy them. Especially the transformations, because I know in Half Genie Hero, there's all sorts of different animal transformations, and she loved seeing that. And I'm also a huge voice actor nerd. Like, if you pointed out an actor in a movie, I couldn't tell you who the heck they are from one movie to another. But if I hear a voice that I recognize, I will point out every show I've heard them in. And so it's neat hearing Christina V as Shantae. She's been the voice of Shantae for pretty much any time she's had a voice. You also know her maybe as the voice of Mako in the Digimon Adventure Tri films. She's also Marinette in Miraculous, and dozens upon dozens of other roles out there. So those are just sort of the two notable ones, because I'm kind of going through a Digimon kick right now, and Miraculous is one of my daughter's favorite shows. In any case, enough backstory. Let's talk Shantae and the Seven Sirens. Now, my first play of this game has been with my daughter, Paige, and we've put in a couple of hours so far. Paige has been leading the charge with me jumping in if we run into anything too difficult. And right off the bat, I'm digging that all of the maps are connected, like Metroid or Castlevania, especially like the Super Metroid games. I'm also getting into the card collection system that's here, because when you beat a certain number of monsters, you can get a skill boost from those monsters by collecting their cards. And while I don't know too much about where the story is going to go here, I'm a fan of there being 6 half genies in the game, with the 5 others mysteriously disappearing early on, and then you have to go and find them. So, conversations in the game are a little easier to deal with this time around. Sections of this game actually have the dialogue voiced. And this is big for me, as basically what this means is less out loud reading when I'm playing the game with Paige and eventually the other kids. Difficulty-wise here, I do find Shantae and the Seven Sirens to be a bit more challenging than Half Genie Hero, but not by too much. It's not enough that it's going to sort of scare you away from it, and it's not like it's a case of Nintendo hard here. It's a bit of a difficulty boost going to those Metroidvania-style games. And that being said, we're still super early into the game, so that difficulty could spike. I just don't know it yet. First impressions, though, the game looks and plays really well. I look forward to giving this more of a go, and if you haven't played a Shantae game before, I'd say it's definitely worth a try. Of course, if you're curious about what the Shantae games are like and have an Xbox One, you can always download Shantae and the Pirate's Curse for free this month through Games with Gold. So my suggestion would be to try that and go from there. Basically, if you're a Shantae newcomer, that's a great place to sort of start, but Shantae is definitely worth it. I've really enjoyed this series. Coming up next, we make a return to Pokemon Sword and Shield with the Isle of Armor coming out in 2 weeks. I'm Jeff Johnson. This is the new GameOn Podcast.
You're listening to Game On.
Tremble in fear at our 3 different types of ships.
Hi, this is John St. John, but you might know me better as the voice of Duke Nukem. And you're listening to Game On. Rock and roll.
You're listening to the new Game On Podcast. Now back to the couch with Jeff Johnson. And thanks again for listening to the new Game On Podcast. I am Jeff Johnson, and you can find us on social media all over the place. You can go to YouTube and find us on youtube.com/GameOnGNT. There's also Spreaker, my blog, JJ Plays Everything. So that's jjplayseverything at wordpress.com. And endless podcasting sites, thanks to Anchor syndicating us in many different places. I honestly cannot remember all the names of the different podcast sites we're on, but we're all over the place, so you'll be able to find us there. Now, on to my highlight of the week. We've got 2 weeks. 2 weeks to go until the first part of the Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion comes out. June 17th, Isle of Armor will be available to download for anybody who bought the Sword and Shield expansion passes. And yes, I bought the Sword and Shield expansion passes, so I am looking forward to this. And for those who don't know, the expansion pass was announced by Nintendo several months back. It's a bit of a departure for the Pokemon series, as they normally releases these extra games each Pokemon generation that serve as like a director's cut version of the games. So if you were to go back, we're going to go right... Whoa! Okay, hang on a minute here. Okay, hold on. Drop my microphone. That doesn't happen too often. Okay, so if you were to go way back when, like back to Red and Blue, the first time they did it was when they had the special Pikachu Yellow edition. Later years, we saw Ruby and Sapphire had Emerald, Diamond and Pearl had Platinum, and so on and so forth, until the last generation where we saw Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which went along with the Sun and Moon games. So many people were kind of upset about this when it was first announced, but basically this time around, Pokemon went a different route. And instead of releasing a third game to go along with Shield and Sword, the company announced they were going to do DLC expansions. And basically doing these at a cost of about $40 Canadian per game. Now, basically looking at that, obviously, we have people who are arguing, oh, you're just putting more of the Pokemon behind a pay gate. They all should be in the first game anyway. But I personally wasn't too bothered by this. I mean, really, I can't remember the last time they had a Pokemon game with all the Pokemon in them anyways. And you'd pay full price for an extra game to be released anyways. If they were to say to do, instead of, let's say we've got Pokemon Shield and Pokemon Sword, if they were to do a Pokemon Armor game for the Switch, you'd be dropping $80 anyways. So if you only have one copy of Sword or Shield, you only need to spend $40 to get that extra content that you'd get released in that third game anyways. So if you're looking at that, or you could be like my family and get multiples of each game, as we're a Pokemon house, and one file per game simply isn't going to do it. Which, while I've got you, I just want to talk about how the Switch has made things so much better in that regard, because past generations of Pokemon, we've bought multiple copies of the game. Like when Sun and Moon came out, we got 2 copies of each, because there's always only one file per game that you have to work with per cartridge. And so when you do that, you have to actually basically have multiple copies of the game if you have more than one person who's playing the Pokemon games in your house, which is a total pain and a total cash grab, because so many other games have been doing the whole 2-3 save files per game for years and years. And so basically where the Switch got it right was the save files are based on your profile on the Switch. So you can have one cartridge of the game, but because you can have multiple profiles on the Switch, you can have multiple save files for each profile. So it works out super well that way. Anyway, back to the topic at hand here. I bring all this up because the Shield and Sword expansion got a new trailer released last night. It's building on many of the promises expected from this expansion pass, and that's due out on June 17th. And it looks good. It looks really good. The trailer showed more of the Pokemon joining the lineup through the expansion. So, like, there's a number of old favorites that are coming back from this. Luxray being one of them. I saw Volcarona on there. Magmar's in there. Electabuzz is in the mix again. There is many different older Pokemon that are coming back through this. And it also gave us more details about the legendaries being introduced in both parts of the expansion, and showed us the Gigantamax evolutions of some old fan favorites like Blastoise and Venusaur, and the Gigantamaxes for the starters for Sword and Shield as well. And I mean, I know there's people who are excited to see the Gigantamax forms, but I'm more excited for that second half of this expansion pass, where we get to see the alternate versions of Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres. Like, those guys look really cool. Plus, new Reggies being introduced, which is also really good, because at this point there are 4 Reggies, each with a different type, and now they're introducing 2 more of 2 different types. So that's pretty exciting. The 3-minute trailer, it's worth your time to see if you are a Pokemon fan and you want to know what you're getting into from the new gameplay in 2 weeks. And honestly, I was not a hard sell on this. I love Shield and Sword. The games actually rank very high on my top 100 games I've ever played list. And so getting a chance to come back to this world with new places to see and more wild area to explore is totally worth the cost of that expansion pass for me. So in 2 weeks, I guarantee I'm going to be talking about this expansion when I get to play these new locations for myself. And that's about it on the Isle of Armor. When we come back, let's talk about what's going to be a colossal failure. It's a small system that's based on an old classic, and we're going to be looking at that. Sega, I'm talking about you. I'm Jeff Johnson. This is the new GameOn Podcast.
It's all about the game, and how you play it, all about control, if you can take it. Do you think that we could play another game? Maybe I could win this time.
You're listening to Game On with Jeff Johnson.
This is Morbo, the newscaster. Today's forecast, doom, unless you're listening to Game On.
Game On, your new favorite podcast on today's drive to work.
Mamma mia!
We set high standards here. Here's Jeff. And it's Jeff Johnson. I am the host of the new Game On Podcast, host of Game On GNT on YouTube.com. And you can also find us on the JJ Plays Everything blog. That's jjplayseverything.wordpress.com. And, of course, find us on every podcast network under the sun, except for Apple's music. That's something I'd like to get us on, Apple Podcasts at some point. But you can find us on Spreaker, on Anchor, and on many other different sources. Thank you, Anchor, for getting us to all those places. Big news from Sega this week, or little news, depending on how you look at it. In celebration of the Game Gear's 30th anniversary, the company has announced the Game Gear Micro. And honestly, my first thought with this, here we go again. When I first heard about the system, I thought along the lines of the NES Classic, the SNES Classic, so on and so forth, that sort of thing. Basically, a smaller version of the system with built-in games, with staples of the system available after years of not being played. And let's face it, most of the times they announce something like this is not a bad thing. This is something that basically gives new generations of gamers opportunity to play on a collector's item, I would say, where you can get a chance to sort of play games from our past, and that's new to new gamers. So there is a benefit for all sides here. And yes, that's what we get, only done horribly. So you see, Sega has announced a series of Game Gear Micros. There's 4 of them in total, each of them a different color, and each of the systems having 4 different games built in. Meaning, if you want to own the entire collection of these games, you need to buy the system 4 times. Or not, because let's face it, who wants to buy 4 systems for 4 games each? Like, to me, why wouldn't they just put all of the games in the collection into one system? I mean, it's not like they haven't released all of these games and collections before for every game system to grace the earth. And if you do buy this system when it comes out, get ready for some eye strain, because the screen is only 1 inch wide. 1 inch. Seriously, how do they expect anybody to play with something so small and actually enjoy themselves? That's what she said. I just realized what I did there. Oh, God. Okay, but that's okay. That's okay, because there's a big screen adapter as well that you can attach to the Game Gear Micro, making everything better, right? No, it doesn't. Because no, you have to pay more money for that big screen adapter as well. And come on, let's be honest here. The bigger screen size should have just been built in. It should have just been that size from the start. Now, not only that, but the system does not have a built-in recharging option. You know, like all portable systems today, you know, you can just plug them in and charge them and play them again. No, this doesn't happen here. 2 AAA batteries are needed, and those batteries only last 3 hours. And if you had the old Game Gear, you know that that thing just ate batteries like crazy. Well, the little one does pretty much the exact same thing. Just the batteries are gonna go with this guy. So, looking at that, really, you've got all that going on for it. All these details. And the final kicker is the system itself with the eye strain, the 4 games, and the short battery life is priced at $60 Canadian. $60! Seriously, what kind of a ripoff is this? And I'm going to guarantee that this thing will be the worst of the classic consoles to ever be released. I mean, I would love a chance to give a go on the Game Gear games because, to be honest, most old Game Gears really have a hard time working these days. And plus, I never really got a chance to sort of explore the Game Gear catalog because my Game Gear, I had got a Game Gear late in the system's life and there wasn't many opportunities to buy Game Gear games at that point. So, $60. $60. If you've seen past videos with me before, you know I get pissed off about these little things costing so much. And I know this thing's going to get bought up too, because $60 for a system seems like a small price, but you're only getting 4 games built into this thing, and it looks so shoddily built as it is. Hopefully Sega learned some lessons from this. And down the line, we get like a quality 32X classic, or a Saturn classic, or a Dreamcast classic even down the line. I could go for that. But not this. Not this thing. This thing will not be coming into my house. That about wraps things up for this week's episode, though. Thanks for listening. I'm Jeff Johnson, and this has been the new GameOn Podcast. And you've been listening to the new GameOn Podcast with Jeff Johnson. You can find more content from GameOn on Facebook and on YouTube.com/GameOnGNT. And don't forget to check us out on Spreaker for all your podcast needs. Next week, we introduce the GameOn Podcast Micro. Same content, lasting only 15 seconds. It'll be gangbusters.